How are they related? What did you come up with? Where did you start with? So someone define ejection fraction and someone define cardiac output for me in its simplest terms. Use the book. I don't care. Use the internet. What's ejection fraction? Yep.
A measurement of the percentage of blood leaving your heart each time it contracts.
It's a percentage of the blood leaving the heart each time it contracts. Right. That's right. So not all of the blood that's in your heart leaves with every beat. Doesn't have to every time. Okay. So that's that. Okay. So what's the definition of cardiac output? In its simplest terms. You can read it straight from a source. I don't care. Right. What is that? What is cardiac output? Yeah, Lucas.
Blood volume pumped by each ventricle per minute.
Yep, say that again, louder.
Blood volume pumped by each ventricle per minute.
Yeah. It's the amount of blood. So it's a lot like ejection fraction, right? Because each one has an ejection fraction, each atrium has an ejection fraction, right? But when we're talking about cardiac output, we're leaving the heart. That's the difference. In the atrium, the blood is actually leaving the heart when it goes from one atrium to the ventricle, right? Okay, so they're similar, but how are they related? What kinds of things make them similar or different? Well, what other information do you know? That whole osmolarity question, that whole thing was a way to get you to think about physiology in certain way, right? You have to use that all semester long. So what else do you know about these two things? You have to have some tools. Yep.
The cardiac output takes into account heart rate and stroke volume, and ejection fraction is stroke volume over the end diastolic volume.
That's perfect. That's your secret weapon right there, right? So what you didn't have to do this, but the best answer you could have given me would have combined the two, right? So you could. That's how they're related. Now, I didn't expect you to get that, right? I did not expect you to get that. But that's what these equations do. They're theoretical, right? Now, again, you sort of have the idea, but okay, now that we have it, it says that cardiac output equals the heart rate times the ejection fraction times the end diastolic volume, which you don't know yet. Right? All I did was substitute these. If these two are equal to stroke volume, then these two must be equal to stroke volume. That's all I did, right? Not that this is a math course, because it's not. But, so our cardiac, here's what I wanted to show you though. Are they exactly the same thing? They can't be. They can't be, right? Because if they're exactly the same thing, you can't use, when you define a word, can you use that word in the definition? You can't. Right? So if this is exactly the same as this, then I'm sure I've violated some mathematical law. Right? You can't use a term to define the term. The term can't define itself. So they're not exactly the same. But they sound alike, don't they? And that sort of was the point of that question, to say, okay, they're not exactly the same. So this equation, cardiac output is a bigger issue. The way I like to think about it is cardiac output is the blood flow per minute throughout the entire system. Right? Whereas the ejection fraction is more just what the blood coming out of the heart is in any given minute. But so the ejection fraction is a small part of the cardiac output. You can think of it as older sister and younger sister, right? Like this is the whole picture, this is a little bit of the picture. At that, coming right out of the aorta, this is a great definition. But when you're looking at the entire system, the amount of blood flowing through the entire system in a minute or a second, that's cardiac output. Okay. All right. So while I'm setting this up real quick here, 3 most important things we did last time. Yep, there you go. You learn the equations. So now you can sort of see how, did I actually solve? I mean, I did, but I didn't actually put numbers in here, right? You can see how you have to start to think this way. That's what these equations use. And they're not really, I mean, did I do some advanced math? All I did was some simple substitution, right? You got to look at these and say, if these are a tool, if the PV loop and Wigger's diagram are a tool, then I have to figure out how to get the most out of those tools. It's not just to solve an equation. That would be easy, right? If I had given you that the cardiac output was 5 liters per minute, right, and that the stroke volume was 0.340 mils, right? Couldn't you just done the math? Yeah. You just have to do a little conversion, but it's not. That's not the point. The bigger issue is conceptual. All right, conceptual. If somebody would lower the lights, please. All right, 2 more things. Yep. Pressure gradient. Right? Gradients. In physiology, lots of gradients. Pressure is one of them. Jacob.
You use parts of the heart and flow.
Yeah, know the parts of the heart like the back of your hand and the flow, right? You got to be able to say this in your sleep. It's just something you got to know. That way, when we're talking, you'd be like, oh, I know where he is. Make a song out of it. Whatever works, you know? Just review. All right, so I think we left off on the electrical conduction system. All right, so we'll start over, essentially. So a little bit of a review. Remember, there's 4 chambers. This is the right side of the heart, right atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. We've got these valves in between. The sinoatrial node is a pacemaker, right? It works off of graded potentials. The specific name for the graded potential in the sinoatrial node is called a pacemaker potential. And if you look back in your chart that talked about the types of graded and action potentials, a pacemaker potential is actually on that table. Okay? So we'll talk about how this works. So a signal gets sent out for now, and it goes everywhere, right? Because an electrical signal is going to go everywhere. Electricity is like water. It finds the easiest route to wherever it wants to go. In electricity's terms, electricity always wants to go to ground. The fastest way to get to ground, that's how it's going to go there. So it's a little lazy, but it's very good at doing what it does. So it's going to go everywhere. Some of this current is going to go so that you can pick it up with EKGs, right? We've already done EKGs, and you see the electrical signal can be picked up. It's going to bounce around here. This junction, the area between the atria and the ventricles, is insulated, so that when an electrical signal comes here, it bounces off, right? Now, it doesn't bounce off of all of these because some of it gets through. But off of this part, it does. It bounces off until it gets to this area here. And that's called the AV node. It stands for atrioventricular. Atria, ventricular, ventricles. So it's the spot in between the atria and the ventricles. This is a channel, an electrical channel, that allows a current to flow through it. Now, why did I say that you had to have this insulated layer in here? What was the point of having that insulated layer? Why have it there at all? Yeah?
The time delay mechanism?
It's a time delay mechanism. It's the first of the time delay mechanisms. You have to delay the signal. Built into the AV node is also a set of time delay signals. Okay? So the resting membrane potential of the AV node is actually hyperpolarized compared to the SA node. The resting membrane potential of the AV node is actually more negative than the SA node. So it's hyperpolarized. So in order to get a signal to come through here, you've got to go above and beyond. You've got to get the thing to threshold. That's number 2, delay mechanism. Delay mechanism number 3 is a gap junction. Okay? So if you haven't taken anatomy with me, or you're not neuro, a gap junction is a type of junction that connects cells, and we sort of talked about it. So if we had 2 neurons that are connected, and this does happen for real, this is not some made up thing, because I like to make up stuff all the time. So half the time you don't know what I'm telling you the truth or not, right? This is real. This is real. Neurons sometimes touch one another. And when they're touching like this, there's no real reason to have an axon or dendrites to get information from one side to the other. So they have these small channels that connect them. And they're made up of different parts, connexons and connexins, if you remember those last semester, right? And these channels will allow ions to go through, sodium, potassium, but they will also allow electrical current to go through. And so when these ions move through, they're moving electrical current. They'll also allow, things like chloride to go through. So these gap junctions connect cells that are connected, but they connect them functionally. They're physically connected, so structurally they're connected. But we want to physiologically, functionally, because that's what physiology is, right? Anatomy is the structure, physiology is the function. To connect them functionally, physiologically, you have these channels that allow electrical current to flow through them. These gap junctions, they're called gap junctions. These gap junctions occur in the central and the peripheral nervous system between neurons. They also occur in the GI system between some of the muscle cells, and they occur between the cells of the heart. And the cells of the heart, they have this really weird look to them. They have a Z-like shape to them. Okay? So then you have another one here. Something like that. They're strange looking, and they're also, remember, they're striated. Okay, and this is called an intercalated disc. Intercalated disc, which is just like a Z disc in skeletal muscle. It just got a different name. Okay? These cells, and I've spread them apart. They're actually a lot tighter looking than this. Okay? These cells have these gap junctions between them that allow current to move through from one to the next very, very quickly. Okay? All of the heart cells. Now, these are the contractile cells. These are the muscle cells that actually contract. Remember that the SA node and the AV node don't contract. They're autorhythmic cells. They used to be able to contract, but they can't anymore. So all of the atrial cells and the ventricular cells are physically connected. And within them, they have lots and lots of gap junctions. I'm putting one here, but there's lots of them, hundreds and thousands of them. Okay? In the contractile cell, there's lots of them. Because when the SA node sends out a signal, do you want to give a lot of resistance to that signal in the muscle itself? No. You want the signal to flow as smoothly and as quickly as possible, so that these and these cells do what? Why do you want lots of gap junctions in the actual contractile cells, the myocardial cells, in the atria and in the ventricle? Because what do these two things have to do together? And what do these two things have to do together? And there's your answer. When the atria contract, do they contract like two separate chambers? No. What do they contract like? The answer. They don't contract like two separate chambers. They must contract like, yeah, they contract. It's called a syncytium in physiological terms. A syncytium. So, they contract like one unit. They have to. They have to. That means you've got to be able to move this current, this electrical flow, as fast as you possibly can. Having them connected, touching each other is good, but having these gap junctions and lots of them makes it better. It's like having aquaporins, right? You can flow water through cells without aquaporins, but it's a whole lot faster with them. Same thing. These are just like aquaporins, but for electrical current. Does that make sense? Now, the actual myocardial cells, the contractile cells, have lots of gap junctions. Remember how I started this conversation. We're talking about a delay mechanism to keep the electrical current from getting here too soon. The first delay mechanism is insulating the junction here. The second delay mechanism is making sure that the resting membrane potential here is lower, more negative. The third one is that compared to the surrounding cells, the number of gap junctions in the AV node is much, much lower. That's going to slow it down. All three of those things keep the signal delayed just a hair. I mean, we're talking about a delay that you cannot fathom, right? It is hard to fathom how fast this actually occurs, and we're talking about a delay that is so small, but that makes all the difference in the world. Okay? Makes all the difference in the world. So those are the three of the major delay mechanisms. Does that make sense to everybody? And why you want to do that? The first thing you have to understand is that you want to delay the mechanism, right? You have to. If you don't delay the message, you're going to have a big problem. The big problem is that these two and these two are going to contract too close to one another. You don't move enough blood from here to here, and then when the left ventricle, which is the most powerful of all the chambers, goes to pump blood throughout your body, what's in there? What's in there if these are all contracting? Go ahead. Next to nothing. How are you going to stay alive if this ventricle, you're essentially in a version of heart failure. You're not, right? It's not actually heart failure because the muscle's fine. It's just the timing is off. But it works just like heart failure in that you're not pumping enough blood, right? So that's very dangerous. So they can do this, and so that's, again, we talked about what the defibrillator is and how you shock the heart. It resets both of these. It shuts them down completely, wipes out all activity. And for a second or two, nothing happens. But the whole system has been reset. And then the idea, you hope, that this turns itself on again. And then now when it starts up again, it's looked up, looked up, looked up, looked up, in sequence, so that the blood has enough time to go from these to these and then out. Okay? All right. So let's continue. Does that make sense to everybody? Because that's big. That's huge. What I just explained to you. That's key concept. All right. So now the signal finally gets here, and it's been delayed enough. Now it's got to get transmitted down. This is called the bundle branches. Okay. This is the right bundle branch, and this is the left bundle branch. They're called the bundle of His. H-I-S. The bundle, this is called the bundle of His. So if you've ever been in a hospital setting, you've shadowed a nurse, PA, cardiologist, maybe even a PT, and you've heard about, you have a relative maybe that has some heart issues, and you've heard about right bundle branch blockage, okay? Or left bundle branch blockage, or heart block, right? We're going to start to explain what that means. But you got to understand the anatomy first. So the signal, these branches are like nerves. They're not, but they're like nerves. They function a lot like myelinated axons, but they're not. They just look like them and have the same function. So the electrical current will come down here, all right? And it will also get to these smaller branches, and these smaller branches go everywhere. This doesn't do it justice. These smaller branches are all over the heart. And these smaller branches are called Purkinje fibers. So if you can imagine that this is like a big nerve, these Purkinje fibers are like little nerves. And they're all connected. And so the signal goes from here all over the place so that these contract. Well, it comes down the bundle branches, it goes to all of the Purkinje fibers, and in that time that it takes, the blood has now filled these ventricles, and all of these muscle cells contract simultaneously. Lumped up, lumped up, lumped up, lumped up, lumped up, lumped up. That's how fast this entire process is occurring. That's how you conduct this electrical signal. All right? So you've got the SA node, you've got the AV node, you've got the bundle of His, the right and the left bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers that innervate everything. And the Purkinje fibers only innervate the ventricles. You don't have Purkinje fibers up here. Not in the atria, right? And you don't see it in the atria. I mean, they go up to the top. Remember, this is insulated, so it doesn't matter. Right? But the Purkinje fibers don't actually come into the atria. They're like two separate set of pumps. The atria, ventricles, atria, ventricles. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Now, you can actually have electrical block. And this starts to happen if you have a heart attack, right? A heart attack, when you have one, a myocardial infarction, right? When you have one, it doesn't just kill the contractile cells. It can destroy SA node, it can destroy AV node, it can destroy the bundle branches, the Purkinje fibers. So it's one thing if you only kill the muscle cells that contract. That's one problem. It's another problem if you actually affect the electrical conduction system. Now you've got a bigger problem, right? Because all a myocardial infarction is ischemia, right? Which means that there isn't blood getting to an area, and those cells downstream die. If those cells happen to be contractile cells, then they're myocytes. If they're autorhythmic cells, then they're dead. If they're these bundles of His, then they die. Does that make sense to everybody? It's indiscriminate when you have a heart attack. What's going to die? And how much of it's going to die? There are little heart attacks and big heart attacks, and what they mean by that is the amount of heart that actually dies. And once you have a heart attack, once a piece of your heart dies forever, at least today, as far as I know, you can never bring it back. It's gone forever. You lose it. So that's where stem cell research is coming in. There are actually people that are designing cells, heart cells, that can be implanted into your heart. And the hope is that one day you can implant these, and they will create new myocytes that will then heal the damage that was created by a heart attack. That's what stem cells is trying to do. Because as of right now, once it's dead, it's dead. You can never bring any tissue that's died in a heart attack back. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so now we're going to continue with the electrical. And we're going to what we're seeing here is the spreading, and they do this in yellow, from the SA node, and how it spreads to the AV node, right, and to the atria, and then how the signal then gets transmitted down. Everything's highlighted in yellow here. And then how the ventricles contract and how you're at relaxation. So this is called the PQRST complex. PQRST complex. If it looks familiar, it should, because it's what an EKG output looks like. This shows the electrical activity of your entire heart. This tracing here shows the electrical activity of one beat of your entire heart. That's what an EKG is. In the United States, we use ECG, but EKG is German. That's what the K comes from. Same thing. EKG, ECG, same thing. Right? And it's based on this PQRS-T complex. So when you did the EKG, you did a 3-lead, right? You did a 3-lead. You could do 6-lead, you could do 12 leads. We'll talk about what that is. And you put these patches, one on your arm, one on a leg, and one somewhere else, right? And you're trying to pick up all of this electrical activity. Remember that the electrical activity can escape the heart. It does. It's just this part right here is insulated, but everything else is not. And that's why you're able to, because if the whole heart was insulated, could you pick up electrical activity? No, you wouldn't be able to do it. So you can't be, or else you couldn't read this. And so what this is showing you is that each portion of the PQRS-T complex, when the SA node starts to fire, this is what you get. Right? When both atria fire, you get this bump, a positive bump. When it's being transmitted from the AV node down the bundle of His to the Purkinje fibers, you get this dip and back up. When the ventricles start to contract, you get this. And then finally, when this repolarizes, when the heart is at rest, you get this bump here. This is the T. So this is the P wave. This is the P wave. This thing here is the Q, R, S. You can actually label it that way. And this is the T. So if you had to label this, this is P. This is Q. This is R. This is S, and this is T. So if you've had one done here, but if you go to a cardiologist, right, someone who has heart failure, has heart issues, you do a series of these. And you do multi-channel. So this is a 1-channel. This is probably a 3-lead. But a 12-lead will give you 6 different printouts. And they're a photo of your heart's electrical activity from different angles. So if I wanted to take a picture of this building and know a lot of information about it, right? I could go outside the front of Straz and I could take a picture. That would give me some information about the building, right? Would it give me a lot of information about the building? Let's say you did a panoramic shot. Give you something, right? But if you wanted more information about the building, where else would you have to take some pictures from? Just spout out some areas. Where else would you take pictures from? So you got the front view. Where else would you take pictures from? Yes?
The back side.
The back side. Where else?
Inside.
Go ahead.
Inside.
The inside. Where else? Jacob, inside? Okay. Where else? Above. Doesn't that give you more information about what's going on in this building? That's what a 12-lead EKG does for you that a 3-lead doesn't do. It shows you different areas and the connection of electrical activity. They're electrical pictures, if you think about it that way. And so when you go to a hospital in a clinical setting, they usually do a 12-lead. The 3-lead is good for experiments we do in classes like this, right? It's easier to understand. I have 2 books, if you're interested in this, that explain how to interpret EKGs. All right? So there's electrophysiologist is a specialized electrocardiologist in cardiology. So so you have an electrophysiologist sort of at the top. He or she is a cardiologist that knows more about electrical activity of the heart than any other doctor. Then you have a cardiologist, which he is or she is, that they know a lot, but that's not their specialty. Then they had to have done a fellowship in order to become a cardiologist, so they're already internal medicine doctors, right? So that's what they did their residency in. And then they got a medical degree. So they went to medical school for 4 years. They did a 4-year internal medicine rotation. The first year was general. And then they had to do at least another 2-year fellowship to become a cardiologist. And then to become an electrophysiologist, physiologists, they probably had to do another year or two on top of that. That's how long they've gone to school. Just to give you an idea of how intricate this is. If you go to see someone like that, they know what they're talking about because they've spent basically half their life in school, maybe more. Okay. All right, so this is a snapshot of your heart's activity. And so if you understand from each angle, is the building look the same? So, from each angle, will the PQRS-T complex, what is normal, look the same? No, they look different. Okay, so the sinoatrial node is the heart's pacemaker because it initiates each wave of excitation with atrial contraction. Right, that's what we just said. The bundle of His, which are these two fibers, the bundle branches, and other parts of the conducting system deliver the excitation to the apex. This is the apex of the heart, so the ventricular contraction occurs in an upward sweep. So these two take it down and then it sweeps up. Lots and lots of gap junctions in the muscle, between the muscle cells on both sides. Where don't you have a lot of gap junctions? Here, because of the delay mechanism. Okay. So this is another set of graphs. This is an action potential for your heart. This is an action potential for your left ventricle. Does this look like an action potential that we've seen before? Let me show you. Let me remind you. So when we've drawn action potentials before, when we drew them for, so you've got millivolts, right? And you've got no. This is time. I'm sorry, I screwed myself out. It's been a day. Milliseconds. Excuse me. This is time in milliseconds. This is time in milliseconds, and this is millivolts because this is the voltage, right? And so if you look at make this negative 90, make this plus 20, and you can line these things up. If you look at a neuron, and then you look at a muscle cell. And let's say it's somewhere down here. Let's say this one is negative 70. We'll make this one negative 72. That's what an action potential usually looks like. Okay? If you go to the muscle, it's a little bit slower. So they look the same, but it's a little bit slower. Okay? That action potential doesn't look anything like these two. Because what causes the massive depolarization in both of these? The upswing here on the left side. What ion? Sodium. That's right. Sodium in or out? Into the cell or out of the cell? Correct. Sodium in. Excellent. What causes the repolarization? Potassium, in or out? A resounding, thank you. Very good. So that's true for both of these. All right, now let's take a look at this one. This one doesn't look like that. First of all, you've got this really long, here's the resting membrane potential at negative 55. Okay, and this is negative 45. This takes a long time. Do you see a sweep here that takes that long? No, it doesn't. And this is charged by sodium entering here by these F-type of funny channels. Physiologists who named this must have had a sense of humor. Call them funny. So sodium has to leak into the cell. Most of the leaky channels in your, if you're looking at your nervous system, are what kinds of channels? Most of the leaky channels in your nervous system are what kinds of channels? Potassium, that's right. But in your heart, the leaky channels are sodium, right? Potassium channels leak potassium out of the cell. Sodium channels, by definition, have to leak sodium into the cell. So it starts to leak into the cell, and this thing starts to depolarize. When you get to about, I don't know, negative 48 or so, you now have calcium enter. Okay? These are T-type calcium channels that also open. And it's the T-type calcium channels that open that go from here to threshold. So you need both of these to occur. Do you have any of that going on here? Do you have any sodium doing this? No. Calcium? No. Sodium does this. No calcium involved here. And then so this is a T-type, right here, this is a T-type calcium channel. This then opens up L, as in Larry, type calcium channels. And the L-type calcium channels do this. Right? So it's very, very different, right? Because in those two, it's all sodium. Here you have funny F-type sodium channels, followed by T-type calcium channels, followed by L-type calcium channels. It's slow. You have 3 different channels that got to open up, sets. This is a slow process. Okay. But the repolarization is the same. It's always potassium out. So these 3 let calcium and sodium in. This one lets potassium out. It's much slower because if you think about how quickly a muscle contraction occurs, skeletal muscle, or a transition, an active potential in your central nervous system, they're super fast, right? This, notice how they labeled this. They didn't use milliseconds, right? We're talking seconds here, right? So this is a 15th of a second. Here, we're not talking a 15th of anything. We're talking about milliseconds. 1/1000th of a second. This is tenths and hundredths of a second. That's a lot slower. Right? So this whole thing happens a lot slower because when your heart beats, I mean, your heart's not beating at 65,000 beats per minute. 220 is max, theoretically. Right? That's a lot slower for a human being than the transition or the amount, the speed that it travels down a nerve, right? Which is up to 220 miles an hour, 65 meters per second. So this is much slower. This is what's happening to all those permeabilities. This kind of looks like the estrous cycle, or the estrogen cycle in females. We don't do reproduction here, but if we did, the menstrual cycle, and we looked at the hormones in a female throughout the month, it looks like this, kind of like a shotgun pattern. It's messy, but that's just the reality. This is messy too, right? Look at all the permeabilities going up, down, and everywhere. That's a hot mess. This creates this. So this is something else we're going to have to look at. All right, I'm going to draw both of these. I'm going to draw that one and another one together. So this is an action potential for the SA node. So this is what the SA node action, it's the pacemaker. That's what it looks like. So this is going to be something really important that I'm going to draw. All right? So you've got seconds here, and you've got time, and then you've got millivoltage here. So we're going to start with negative 65, negative 55, negative 45. So negative 45 is threshold. Negative 55 is the resting membrane potential for the SA node. And negative 65 is the resting membrane potential for the AB node. Remember I told you it was hyperpolarized? So why am I putting them together? Because you have to see them together in order to understand them better. So we're just going to draw what's up there. All right. All right, so this is the essay note. Now I'm going to superimpose the AB node on top of that. Now the AB node starts off a lot more negative, but the slopes are the same. So what do you see that's different about them, other than the fact that they're starting at different resting membrane potentials? Go ahead.
There's no hyperpolarization.
There's no hyperpolarization for either of them, actually. They don't hyperpolarize. That's very, very good. Neither one of them hyperpolarizes. That, because here we hyperpolarize when we did the neuron and the muscle, right? There's no hyperpol. What else? What statement could you make? Let's say you didn't know anything about the SA node or the AB node. I hadn't taught you anything. And all I did was I would show you this picture and say, make some observations about the black line versus the green line. What would you say, Mike?
The AB node starts more polarized and it turns to be more polarized.
Yes, it starts more. What else would you say? So just observations, what you can see. What else would you say as a general statement about the comparison of the two? Well, how can you compare them? What would you say? Jacob?
They have the same pattern.
Same pattern, that's right, the same pattern. Same channels might be involved. Okay, what else? Yeah, Daniel.
Same rate of depolarization.
The same rate of depolarization, yes. This pacemaker potential is the same. Now, we're going on the rate thing. That's good. So, but now there's something time. There's a time component here. There's something else on that same train of thought that Daniel just started. You can see it. What's different about it? You don't know anything about this. I just brought you in today. This is like Pepsi versus Coke. Which one do you like better? Okay? You don't know anything about this. You're a history major. You're an English major. And I say, what are the differences? Yep. They start at different times. Yep. So that we're getting there. We're getting closer. What else? Almost there. What I want you to say. I heard it sort of. Yep. They start at different times. Observation. Okay. Go ahead. And this is the window of time.
Not synchronized.
They're not synchronized. Yep. It's another one. Good. These are good. Some of the ones I had. Yep, Daniel.
The AB node takes longer.
Takes longer. So you have fewer of them. So for 2.5, you get 1. Let's do this in the same color. You get 1, 2.5 here for the 1. Remember I told now you know that there's gap junctions in the AB node. You know there's more potassium channels that leak, right? Now why is this important? I'm going to go back a second. Here. Let's imagine for a second. Normal resting heart rate for a human being, right? Normal resting heart rate. It's somewhere, depending on how fit you are, right? Really, really fit people are 50, around 50-ish. You can get into the 40s and 30s. It's within human possibility. To 90, right? Most people in this room, if I measured you, to be somewhere between 50, on average, between 50 and 90 beats per minute. Right? So let's pick something in the middle. Let's say 70 beats per minute. So if your heart beats at 70 beats per minute, that means your SA node is roughly set at 70 beats per minute. Let's say you have a heart attack. Let's say you have a heart attack that damages this thing. Okay? Let's say you have a heart attack, it wipes it out completely. This is all theoretical now, right? If you had that happen, you'd probably be in really, really bad shape. But in my universe, it doesn't kill you. Okay? In my universe, it doesn't kill you. There's a backup system. You're very, very complex. Nature, when you were created, right, as you evolved, you became more and more complex. Do you think that nature would leave you without backup systems? Not at all. So if the SA node goes down, take a guess at what's the next pacemaker in line to take over. AV node. Now when that happens, so this now becomes the pacemaker. It has the capability, it doesn't do it on a normal basis, it's just a channel most of the time. But if this thing starts to get damaged, this thing will become autorhythmic. It'll take over. And so you now go from 70 beats per minute to 50 beats per minute. Now, if you have 50 beats per minute and you're a healthy person, you're in really good shape. But if you just had a heart attack and you're at 50 beats per minute, you're not in good shape. Something has been damaged, right? Does that make sense? So the number itself doesn't tell you a lot. You need context. Okay, now let's say you have another heart attack. And the heart attack takes out the AV node. Do you have another backup system? What do you think? I'm sort of leading you. Yes, of course. Let's take a guess at what the next backup autorhythmic set of cells is. You want to take a guess? Yeah? Before that. Good. No, you're thinking about it, right? You jumped ahead one. Yeah? The bundle of His. This thing. It becomes autorhythmic. It takes over. Now instead of having 50 beats per minute, you're at 30 beats per minute. Now you have another heart attack. You haven't been living right. Or you've been living right for too long. And now you're paying the price. You can look at it multiple ways, kind of like physiology. It's neither good nor bad, but it happened, right? You've been living way too right. Right? This is going to happen to Justin Bieber about 20 years. Good happen. Anyway, so the bundle of His now goes down. You have another backup. Down. That's right. The Purkinje fibers. And now you're down to like 10 beats per minute. Now I'm making these numbers up. But the point is what? That there are backup systems, that each one of them can become active when necessary, and each time you go down the line, that you slow it down more and more. Their capabilities become less and less because there's backup to the backup. Jacob and then Ariel.
Is it like instant or is there the way for like the pickup?
The pickup, it happens pretty quickly. It can happen pretty quickly. Now, this was done. How did they figure this out? Did they kill? Like they wait? They say, okay, you've been not living well. You know, you got a gut there, and you've been doing a lot of bad things for your life recently, and in the last 20 or 30 years, can we use you as a specimen? They didn't use humans. How did they figure this out? They did it. They just knocked it out in rats, mice, gerbils. And they did these experiments. So they actually lesioned them. You go in with a cautery and you knock something out. You see what happens. Is it instant? It happens pretty quickly. So there's a low level of activity that each one of these has. So that makes them ready to go. And as soon as one shuts down, the activity ramps up. Here, you had a question.
So if you, because I know they destroy like the SP node, right? When you put in a
The SA node.
Yes,
When they put in artificial pacemaker.
yeah, so would then the next system take over?
It would. It would start to take over. That's right. That's a good question. So how do you avoid it? You put in the artificial pacemaker. And that one supersedes all of the others. Because the AV node doesn't know where the electrical current is coming from. It doesn't know that it's your SA node that you were born with is generating the larger current, or the artificial pacemaker. As long as it sees it, then it says, okay, well, I'm good. And so yes, it will start. Yeah.
So then after that, do they actually put it into the ventricle of the atrium, or where does it actually get placed?
I think it gets placed in your chest somewhere. Exactly the placement on it, I don't know. But it's somewhere in your chest, and I think they have leads to it. And some of them are adjustable now. The old ones they just got set, and they couldn't be adjusted. But I think with a lot of the technology, you can actually adjust the rate now with a computer. Yeah. But they're pretty simple. They're just current generators. I mean, from a physics standpoint of view, they're just not that impressive. But yeah, so once you obliterate this, you put in the new one, and that will take over, and then the system works just fine. It's fantastic. I mean, it's really pretty cool if you think about it, to keep somebody alive. So the bottom line is that physiological systems have backup systems. When we get to the respiratory system, think about how important your cardiovascular system is, and think about how important your respiratory system is. Do you think there are backups in the respiratory system? Oh yeah, lots of them. For the same reason. Do you think that the backups tend to work as well as the initial protein? No, they usually don't. But they're better than nothing. Right? So there are redundant systems. In other words, they're redundant because the AV node, the Purkinje fibers, and the bundled His are not necessary as long as as pacemakers, as long as the SA node is active, but they're a backup when it goes down. Super important, and you know the sequence. And the fact, now you need to know are these numbers important? Like, no, just that it keeps getting slower. That's what you need to know. And if you wanted to use this as an example, that you could have picked 90 and come down 30 each time. I just picked numbers so it wouldn't go down to 0. It doesn't matter. Just as long as you understand that there is a sequence there's a hierarchy. It's no different than the hierarchy we've set up in the United States for the succession of power if the president dies. It's the vice president, right? And then after the vice president, it's who? Secretary of State, Speaker of the House, right? Goes on and on and on. That's why the Speaker of the House and the Secretary of State, whoever they are, it's super important positions, because if you take 2 and then it goes down the line, same idea. They had this in feudal times too. Physiological systems have been doing this for millions of years, right? So it's not something we came up with. All right, we'll stop here because this is a lot of information. I didn't go through a lot of slides, but we can cruise through a lot of slides next time. All right, 3 most important things today. New stuff. Yep, and then we'll go here. Yep. Yeah, know the graphs. You think there might be what's the difference between a neuron action potential, a muscle action potential, and a SA node versus AV node question potentially on your exam? Maybe. Okay, Marissa.
No, like the pathway for the current.
Yeah. Know the electrical conduction system pathway, Jackie.
Also understand like the delay mechanism.
Yes. What is the delay mechanism? So if I say explain, so I could envision a question. If you start doing this right with this class, you could almost pick every question I'm going to ask you on the next exam before you get there, right? Something to the effect of explain the delay mechanisms in the electrical conduction system of the heart, compare and contrast, blah 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 blah. Here you go. Don't say I never gave you anything. There's a question. All right. Have a great day. Yes.
I feel like I always have questions. For the meeting for research on Wednesday, I was looking at articles online this weekend.
Yep.
And I was wondering if you would be okay with me looking at like athletes who have had